It began with a moment meant for television, a political soundbite crafted to spark applause, not analysis. We don't need their wood. A single line tossed out casually as a symbol of independence ended up reshaping one of the most important trade relationships in North America. What was framed as a flex of national pride quickly became a lesson in economic reality. The United States, fueled by a rising wave of protectionism, wanted to bring jobs home, revive local manufacturing, and prove that it could operate without foreign reliance. Lumber became one of the sectors chosen to demonstrate this new direction. National security tariffs were slapped on Canadian softwood lumber, with the theory that raising the cost of imports would give American mills a chance to grow. But the theory broke down almost instantly. Lumber prices skyrocketed, crossing $650 per thousand board feet and pushing towards $765 levels not seen in years. Builders from Texas to Ohio suddenly paused projects. Homes already teetering on the edge of affordability slipped further away. The National Association of Home Builders warned that every $10,000 increase in home prices would push millions of Americans out of the market. And the tariffs added more than $10,000 to the cost of a typical home. Here was the truth beneath the slogans. The U.S. imports nearly one-third of the lumber it uses. Of those imports, close to 85% come from Canada. So when tariffs hit that supply, they effectively became a tax on American construction. The lumber wasn't sitting idle on docks, builders needed it. Families counted on it. Infrastructure depended on it. Even worse, domestic supply wasn't prepared to fill the void. Analysts estimated the U.S. would remain short by over 3 billion board feet, even if every sawmill ran at full capacity. But American mills were already running at about 95% capacity, grappling with aging equipment and worker shortages. They couldn't produce more, even if they wanted to. Still, the political narrative insisted on strength and independence, while construction sites went silent. Prices surged. Materials became harder to source. Inflation crept through the broader economy. Even as interest rates declined, the cost of building a home kept climbing. For families waiting on new houses, the dream drifted further away. What had started as a symbol of control was rapidly becoming a symbol of unintended consequences. And this was only the beginning. While American builders and buyers struggled, the reaction north of the border took a very different shape. Canada didn't retaliate. Canada reorganized. Prime Minister Mark Carney announced a $500 million plan to support the softwood lumber sector, helping mills diversify and reduce over-reliance on American buyers. Soon after, the federal government added another $1.2 billion Canadian, about $870 million USD, to help the industry absorb anti-dumping duties and explore new markets. The message was clear. Don't fight the tariffs. Outgrow them. British Columbia's Minister of Forests, Robbie Parmar, set a bold target to redirect at least 10% of exports away from the U.S. Not only was the target met, it was exceeded. Japan increased its Canadian lumber imports by more than 26% in early 2024. Germany and South Korea signed new trade agreements. The European Union leaned in, attracted by Canada's strong environmental and sustainability standards. Emerging markets across Africa and the Middle East opened new doors. Canadian delegations launched international trade missions, and ports in Vancouver and Prince Rupert received upgrades to handle rising demand. But the evolution went deeper than geography. Canadian mills began reinvesting in modernization, shifting from exporting raw lumber to producing higher value products. Engineered timber, advanced construction materials, and furniture-grade wood. These weren't just commodities, they were solutions for global housing booms, climate-resilient infrastructure, and sustainable building practices. Canada wasn't just patching its economy. It was reinventing its role in the global supply chain. Companies like West Fraser, Canfor, and Interfor used higher prices and increased revenue to fuel expansions and technological upgrades. Lumber became more than a resource, it became a competitive edge. Worldwide buyers increasingly viewed Canada as reliable, stable, and sustainability focused. By 2025, exports to markets outside the United States had grown by nearly 20%. Canada had broken its dependency. And more importantly, it had built something new, momentum. Back in the United States, the reality was much harsher than the rhetoric suggested. The tariffs had not revived the American forestry sector. They had not reopened shuttered mills. They had not solved labor shortages or modernized equipment. The promised resurgence simply didn't arrive. Instead, the U.S. found itself constrained by the same structural problems that existed before the tariffs, only now with higher prices and fewer options. Builders redesigned projects, canceled developments, and delayed timelines. Materials for renovations and infrastructure became more expensive. Inflation pressures grew, spreading beyond the housing market and into everyday life. Every attempt to justify the policy ran into the same problem. There was no quick fix. You can't create capacity through tariffs alone. You can't build new mills overnight. You can't train specialized workers instantly. The pursuit of self-sufficiency had revealed deep vulnerabilities, not strengths. Meanwhile, Canada kept advancing. Export diversification became a national strategy. Environmental standards became a selling point, opening doors to new agreements under the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement with the European Union. Canada poured investment into green technologies, engineered wood for high-rise towers, modular prefab structures, and cross-laminated timber for climate-friendly construction. The transformation pushed Canadian producers into a space once dominated by Scandinavian and Central European leaders. According to analysts at RBC, if this momentum continues, Canada could become the largest lumber export hub outside of Northern Europe by 2027. This shift wasn't driven by ideology. It was driven by design. Canada looked outward and adapted. The U.S. looked inward and stalled. In the end, this wasn't a story of villains or heroes. It was a story of assumptions of what happens when complex economic relationships are boiled down to a political soundbite. The U.S. believed it could simply cut off a key import and replace it instantly. But in a world where supply chains stretch across oceans, there are no clean breaks, only consequences. Canada turned a crisis into a catalyst. It built bridges instead of walls. It embraced innovation instead of isolation. And it found momentum at the very moment the U.S. was losing it. The final lesson is simple. Strength doesn't always come from standing alone. Sometimes it comes from knowing how to adapt, whom to work with, and how to evolve when the world changes around you. Canada understood that, and it changed its national narrative because of it.